Let's get going. Investment decisions need to reflect the clear scientific evidence, and fiduciary responsibility needs to grasp the intergenerational reality, namely that unchecked climate change has the potential to impact and eventually devastate the lives, livelihoods, and savings of many now and well into the future. This is a quote from Christiana Figueres, the former executive secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change from 2014. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cerin Maduray. I am a divestment campaigner at Fossil Free South Africa, and it's such a pleasure to welcome you all tonight to the launch of our Planet A Investment Guide. I think we can give a round of applause to that. I'm honored to be your MC for the night, and we are so thrilled to have you here this evening as we unveil a resource that we hope will empower South Africans to make more informed and more ethical investment choices. A little bit more about our organization. So Fossil Free South Africa is an NGO addressing the human rights impacts of climate change through divestment from fossil fuels and tackling greenwashing. Our achievements include getting fossil fuel divestment commitments from the City of Cape Town in 2017 and the University of Cape Town in 2022. In fact, our origin was as a volunteer campaign to get UCT to divest. Our fossil ad ban campaign, the first of its kind in Africa, now aims for a total ban on fossil fuel advertising, aligning with global trends. Clean Creative South Africa asks creative advertising and PR professionals to withhold their services from the fossil fuel industry. Our climate reporting guides are a growing resource for journalists who need to understand the climate and energy context for their work. I've been a part of Fossil Free South Africa since June, and it's been such an enriching experience so far. On to tonight. The Planet A Investment Guide, you're gonna hear me saying that a lot. The Planet A Investment Guide is a response to a pressing question we often hear. How can we divest from fossil fuels, coal, gas, oil, which are wreaking havoc on our climate and exacerbating social inequalities, and reinvest in ventures that genuinely benefit both people and our planet? Our full-length guide, along with a shorter, visually engaging handbook, which you would have seen on your seats, seeks to provide clear pathways towards sustainable and socially responsible investments. We first introduced this guide in 2021 with updates in 2022 and 2023. This September, we were proud to present the most substantial update yet, marking the official launch of the Planet A Investment Guide. It encapsulates our commitment to fostering a new era of ethical investing that goes beyond climate issues, addressing topics such as corporate governance to human rights violations in regions such as Gaza and Sudan. Our guide not only highlights fossil fuel-free investment options, but also showcases the growing field of ESG, environmental, social, and governance investments. Importantly, we emphasize that while many funds label themselves as sustainable, they may not always exclude fossil fuels. Hence, our goal is to offer clarity and direction amidst this complex landscape. A little bit more about the ESG concept. It has its challenges. While it aims to blend ethics with profit, many traditional investors are skeptical, and proprietary methods can hide the true impact of ESG ratings. The links between fossil fuel-free investments, ESG, and sustainable funds reveal a tension. While ESG encourages responsible practices, its ability to drive meaningful change towards a net zero future is questionable. Essentially, ESG highlights the need for better oversight in a world still shaped by fossil fuel interests, but it often falls short of realizing genuine sustainability goals. But we'll get into all of that later. Let's move on to the flow of events for this evening. So after this introduction, we'll watch a compelling video by earth scientist Johan Rockström on climate tipping points, setting the stage for tonight's discussions. We'll then hear 5-minute presentations from representatives of various financial services, explaining why ethical investments matter for our climate and human rights. This will be followed by a panel discussion where we'll explore public interest in ethical funds and the obstacles to ethical investment in South Africa. We'll then invite our very own Joanne Smitheram to do a brief breakdown of the investment guide. We'll then open the floor for a quick Q&A session, and then we'll wrap up with some closing remarks and special thanks. I can't thank you all enough for being here tonight and for your commitment to a sustainable future. But before we get into tonight's events, I want to hand over to David, our Fossil Free South Africa Director, to make a few comments about this venue and how it relates to our work. A little bit more about David. He is a co-founder and now director at Fossil Free South Africa and has a background as a human rights and science journalist. He's been working on climate and social justice issue for over 20 years. Welcome, David.
Thanks so much, Sandrine, and thanks very much, everyone, for coming this evening. So this is a bit of an aside, in a sense, to our events, but at the same time, it also relates quite strongly to it. 2 days ago, I got an email from one of the people who's long taken an interest in our work, Professor Leslie London, Chair of the Public Health at UCT. He has also been, in his private capacity, the chair of the Observatory Civic Association, which led public opposition to the development of the Amazon River Park facility. He expressed great shock and disappointment in our choice of this venue this evening, saying, firstly, the Biscuit Mill is part of the gentrification of Salt River. It is part of a wider process of moving poorer residents of Cape Town out of well-located areas so that private investment can move in and accelerate gentrification. He went on to say, the owner of the Biscuit Mill is also the developer of the River Club for Amazon's HQ for Amazon Web Services. The development, contrary to all established environmental heritage and planning policies, has placed a massive heap of concrete on a floodplain and disrupted what is meant to be a coast-to-coast green strip. He goes on to say the Amazon development is greenwash personified. It is destroying the city's climate resilience, building more roads so that more cars can park at the River Club, and has deeply divided indigenous movements through co-option of Khoi leaders willing to support the placement of this massive amount of concrete on what should be a national heritage site. So I'm generally hesitant to talk about issues that I'm not super well versed in, and I'm not super well versed in this one, but I think it's pretty clear that the Amazon development appears in very significant respects to be a classic example of the kinds of growth at any cost, short-term, short-sighted development that is anathema to what we stand for as a campaign. And we would have thought twice and three times about having this venue if these had been called to our attention beforehand. We do know that Amazon as a company kind of epitomizes global inequality, engages in union bashing, has poor safety standards, and has a climate pledge which after 5 years has still seen its emissions higher than when that pledge was initially made. So we apologize to those who we have disappointed in this choice of venue.
Before we watch the video, I want to provide a little bit of context to the video itself as well as the presenter. Sorry. So Johan Rockström is the director of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and an internationally recognized scientist on global sustainability issues. He's also one of the leading originators of the powerful planetary boundaries framework that maps out humanity's full impact on our Mother Earth. The following video provides a chilling scientific assessment of the current state of our planetary home and its diminishing resources, and also explains what must be done to preserve it before it's too late. In particular, he will explain how our current impacts on the climate risk irreversible damage and start runaway warming processes, so-called tipping points, that may have already been triggered and will definitely be triggered long before the 2050 target that all too many companies and countries claim to have set for their supposed net zero targets. I hope you all learned something from this watch. Thank you. I feel like those of us with climate anxiety need to do a breathing exercise after that video. Wow, sobering to say the least. We'll actually be asking our presenters for tonight to provide a very short, immediate reaction to that video. But before we do so, and before their presentations, I'd like to introduce them all. So I've already introduced our beloved David, so I'll introduce the rest of our presenters for tonight. I'll start with Preanka Naidoo. She is the head of corporate solutions at Sanlam Investments Multi-Manager, which is a role she's had since September 2022. She's previously worked at Signia Asset Management and Alexander Forbes, and has a BCom and master's degrees from UCT and WITS. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Preanka. The next person I'll introduce. Sorry guys, I'm a bit jittery. But the next person I'll introduce tonight is Cerin Maduray. Yes, perfect. He's a finance sector specialist at WWF. He advocates for the role of finance in driving environmental sustainability and has a deep understanding of the intersection between finance and conservation. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Cerin. So this next person I'm introducing tonight is actually representing two people tonight. Traci Porter, who's here on behalf of herself, as well as Dian Janssen van Rensburg, who unfortunately couldn't join us tonight. So I'll introduce both of them. I'll start with Dian. Dian is the CEO of Platform Solutions at Efficient Group, where he focuses on innovative investment solutions that are both profitable and ethical. And Traci Porter is a financial advisor at Efficient Wealth, specializing in helping clients align their investments with their values, particularly in the context of sustainable finance. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Traci. Next, I'd like to introduce Waleed Hendricks, who is the head of quantitative ESG research at Old Mutual. And he also leads the ESG product development team. Waleed was instrumental in building out the ESG team's intellectual property and product suite. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Waleed. Of course, these introductions do not do justice to everything you've all accomplished in your careers, but we are so glad you've joined us here tonight. Before your presentations, I'd like to ask you to please provide us with just your thoughts and feelings on the video we've just seen in 1 minute. Thank you, if possible. Yeah, we can start, Cerin. I love how everyone's just passing the mic along. You're gonna have to speak anyway. Cerin, go ahead.
Yeah, so the planetary boundaries framework is something I'm familiar with. I've seen it quite a few times. I've used it in presentations to corporates, finance sector, partners. And so seeing it now, especially from the person who created the framework, was really interesting to see his perspective, how things have changed over his career. And for me, working for WWF, we just inundated with this kind of information all the time. So the climate anxiety has moved past. We're now getting into what can we do about it. And if you let that climate anxiety overpower you, because it is very scary, everything that he said there gives you existential dread. But it's important to look at each of those frameworks, and it's important to actually take out, okay, so what can I do from this? What can I bring to a certain conversation, advise our partners in terms of how they can have a better impact on biodiversity, on the climate, on water, on all the different metrics in that planetary boundary. So that's kind of my takeaway from the video. Thanks.
Thank you. Traci?
Okay, I keep things simple, sorry. I'm amazed when I see that video that people still think that climate change is a conspiracy theory. And unfortunately, some of those people I know and work with.
So, I found the video profound. I'm not familiar with all the methodologies. I'm not an environmental scientist. So I'm a quant, I'm an ESG specialist, so I work on building ESG products. But I think it's a very real reminder in terms of the work we do, the impact and why it's important. Thank you.
I guess it's me, last. I think the video was absolutely terrifying. I think it creates the impetus for financial services companies to really reevaluate the way in which we look at investments for the longer term gain of society. I think it's also, I think my panelists mentioned it, it's scary that there's still so many conspiracy theories that are out there regarding sustainable investing. But I think what it does confront in each and every one of us is a real change in the way in which we live our lives. I think sometimes we forget, if you think about your daily morning routine, you get out of bed, you switch on the lights, you go brush your teeth, you put on the kettle to have a cup of coffee. Each and every action that you make has an impact on the environment, and I think we seldom don't reconcile that in our minds. And so it's a call to action, not just for financial services companies, but for everyone to reevaluate our contribution to the environment.
Thank you. David, you want to say one or two things?
No, I won't add to that.
Okay, thank you so much. So, our brief to our presenters for their presentations tonight was to explain to you all in 5 minutes or less why you, as people who are deeply concerned about climate change, should invest in their products. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with Preanka. Thank you. Everyone give her another round of applause. Thank you.
I promise I won't bore you all to death, but as mentioned, my name's Preanka and I represent Sanlam Investments Multi-Manager today. At Sanlam Investments Multi-Manager, as the name suggests, we're a multi-manager. Well, what does that actually mean? It means instead of buying shares and instruments when it comes to portfolios, we diversify portfolios by selecting asset managers who we believe are skillful in managing strategies. When it comes to the Sanlam Living Planet Fund, we partner with the WWF in order to manage this fund. And importantly, just to mention in terms of the WWF's goals, it's really to positively impact the planet's natural environment and to build a sustainable future for all humanity. So how do we do that? How can we efficiently and effectively ensure that we come to the party? Well, really what it requires is a shifting in mainstream assets towards sustainable investments. So what we try to do at Sanlam Investments Multi-Manager is to go to the likes of retirement funds, sovereign funds, high net worth individuals, some mutual funds and a few others, and really get them to come alive to the reasoning and the fact that there are real investment repercussions for investing in fossil fuels, nuclear generation, as well as arms. But with that being said, there's also great investment opportunity out there if you want to construct a fund that is really aligned to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So maybe to talk a little bit more about the fund and how we structured it. Firstly, from a performance objective point of view, the fund is structured to give a competitive investment return and outperform its fixed strategic benchmark that is in place, as well as to target CPI plus 5%, so in other words, to outperform inflation plus 5% over the longer term. But quite importantly, and typically what you don't necessarily see with investment funds in the South African industry, we also have an environmental objective. And that is to actively manage and integrate principles that enhance the sustainability of the natural environment for the long term. So in doing so, there are going to be a few exclusions when it comes to what we invest in if there's that environmental objective that's also in place. So the WWF will not engage with companies whose core businesses are related to arms and weapons, tobacco, pornography, nuclear power production, trade in specific flora and fauna, animal testing when it comes to cosmetics, as well as non-medical products, and the testing of animals when it comes to the endangered species for medical testing. The WWF will also not engage financially with companies whose core businesses relate to fossil fuels. So just to give you a little bit more of a glimpse into the fund and some of the holdings that are in there that really speak to the environmental integration, I've mentioned two. So first is the City of Cape Town Green Bond. We wanted to showcase these two particular investments within the fund because it actually has an impact from a South African standpoint. So the City of Cape Town Green Bond really is targeted to upgrade the city's reservoirs, sanitation systems, river systems, as well as sustainable transport. Another investment that's made into the fund is the Prescient Clean Energy Infrastructure Fund. This is a debt fund that is really focused on solar power as well as wind renewable strategies when it comes to energy. Also, just importantly to mention, within the context of the fund, there is no exposure to coal companies, and we fully divested from Sasol. Now, from a performance point of view, this is where things get interesting. So we've got the Sanlam Living Planet Fund, which is in blue. We're looking at performance on a since inception basis, so from the start of the fund and on a cumulative basis. And what we're comparing it to is that green line. That green line is the Alexander Forbes Large Manager Watch. By show of hands, does anyone know what that means? Well, that's great. One person's great. But what that really means is it's the largest balanced fund managers in the country contribute to the survey, and they put their returns within the survey. So you're taking the median of the largest fund manager strategies in the country, and we're comparing the performance relative to that. And very pleasingly, you always want to see that blue line on top of the green, and we're being able to evidence that. So we're very pleased about the performance of the fund and what we've been able to achieve in the fund. But hopefully I leave you all with the impression that doing good and doing well are not mutually exclusive. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, amazing. Next, I'm going to invite, Traci? Yes, perfect, thank you.
Right, it's always daunting speaking to a group of people, especially as I'm used to just dealing with individuals. I'm going to take a bit of a different approach to the way that I present, and that is because I'm really proud of the fund that we've created. We created it in collaboration with other people. And the reason that we started this fund was I'm a financial advisor, and one of my clients said to me, she's actually sitting here right now, Greer Blizzard. And she said to me, please tell me where my money is invested. Is it ESG? Are they ESG funds? And I looked at this and I thought, what on earth is ESG? I didn't have a cooking clue. Anyhow, I Googled, I looked all over, I chatted to people, and no one could tell me what it was. This was about 9 years ago. Yeah, a long time ago. And anyway, so I went back to Greer and I said, no, look, I can't find any ESG funds. I'm really, really sorry. So anyway, after it then became my big ambition was to find someone who would actually start one. And when I joined the Efficient Group, I connected, well, Dion is one of the directors there, and I cornered him in the passage one day and I said, Dion, come, don't you want to start an ESG fund? And he went, what? Okay, let's do it. And I went, excuse me? And it was amazing that this man who is so successful and so great at what he does, he put his ego, he put his everything on the line to help start this ESG fund. And when we met up with quite a few of it's a collaboration, so we met up with, am I allowed to say the organizations? Okay, met up with Just Share, met up with Fossil Free South Africa, met up with someone from another company. We met up, there were a few of us. And the conversations were really interesting because we didn't know enough about, we transplanted, it was so great, and the conversations were really hectic and really interesting. And when we went back to Efficient and said, we're not going to have SASOL, everyone was like, you can't not have SASOL. It's just, you just don't do that because you might lose out on returns. So anyway, we're very, very proud of this fund. It's been going 3.5 years, and unfortunately I deleted the slide that shows that shows how well it's done. But at the end there's a QR code, I'm very proud of this, that links to my email address. So please scan it and email me and I'll send you the slide. Now, yes, Gordon?
Traci, I must say, I was one of the first investors in that fund, and it's one of the best performing assets in my portfolio.
Thank you. So Dion and I work really well together because we're complete opposites. I'm the talker and the creative person, and he's the technical person who makes sure it all works. So when he was sick today, he asked me if I could do his presentation. I did take out some of his slides. Okay, but what I'm really proud to see is that we are now used to seeing very technical slides in the investment space, and I love the fact that we're seeing the same words in here that we saw in the clip earlier. Economy, well-being, sustainable development. These things weren't in our slides before. So economy is about allocating the resources available to society in a way that maximizes social well-being. Well-being is a positive state of being where current and future needs are met. That there's a capacity and opportunity to flourish. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs and well-beings of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Isn't that amazing? Then another great slide. This came from Harvard Business School. Okay, there were 1,694 companies which had positive earnings before interest and tax. Now I've just gone, and I've just lost it, sorry. So in 2018, these were all great companies that looked fabulous. But if we took out the cost of environmental damage, 15% would have seen their profit more than wiped out. 32% would have seen their return reduced by 25% or more. Isn't that amazing? So we see that what we do is important. So ESG equals sustainability and well-being for all. Okay, we've seen that ESG is not just about the environment, it's about social and governance. We all know about Steinhoff, we all know Tiger Brands, Glencore, and British American Tobacco. We all know what happened with them. And that's my QR code. Did I make 5 minutes?
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks, Traci. I think now I want to know who that third company was that you didn't mention, but okay, I'll ask you afterwards. Waleed, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you. So we've only got a few minutes, 5 minutes, eh? 5 minutes. So yeah, I gave a bit of introduction. We are fit in the organization. So I'm representing Old Mutual Investment Group. Maybe I'll just give a bit of background about our strategic focus. As an investment house, we've made the commitment. we're a signatory of the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative, right? We signed at the beginning of 2022, I think it was Jan. And as a house, we've committed to ensure that 100% of our exposure is under some sort of net zero methodology or strategy by 2025, right? What that means for our local market is different to how we're going to achieve that from an offshore scale, of course. I'm going to focus on our ESG product suite with a specific focus on our actively managed ESG equity fund and global ESG active equity fund as well. So from an offshore perspective, we've made tremendous progress in terms of changing some of our benchmarks from the All Country World Index, which is emerging markets and developed markets, to a Paris-aligned benchmark. So for those of you who don't know what a Paris-aligned benchmark is, it's a widely adopted methodology to ensure that 50% of your portfolio's carbon emissions or your portfolio's carbon intensity needs to be half of the benchmark in which you're managing your fund against. So we made progress in that sphere from an offshore perspective. From a local market perspective, for our ESG, SA ESG equity fund, we do not hold SASL, a 75% less carbon intensive than the shareholder weighted index benchmark. However, we do, due to the nature of our business, we do have passive equity holdings where we invest directly in the market. So through that lens, we do hold SASL. But that doesn't mean we, wiping our hands clean. We do have a rigorous stewardship approach where we're engaging and stewarding these assets. Okay, so our ESG product suite at a very high level, we got our indexation products, which we were first to market with about plus minus a decade ago. And that is investing directly into MSCI World ESG leaders and MSCI EM ESG leaders. And the philosophy of those funds is to get the same market return while doing better for the planet. So you're getting those high ESG credentials, but you're not sacrificing returns. So sort of organic at the same price. And the two funds I want to highlight in this presentation is our Mutual Global ESG Equity Fund, as well as our Mutual SA ESG Equity Fund. Okay, so just to chat a bit about the methodology of the fund. So for our global ESG capability, we launched that fund in 2022 as our mutual investment group's first Paris-aligned, actively managed portfolio. What that means is that we hold 50% less carbon than the benchmark, as well as certain controversial business activities or negative screening that are excluded from the portfolio, such as weapons, alcohol, tobacco, nuclear, and that is excluded whether you're a primary producer of the production or sale of that product or service, and there's certain threshold and limits that we have in place. So that is excluded from the starting investable universe. We also have a proprietary ESG risk model, which we use to assess companies from a risk and return perspective. And that's not just a standard ESG rating. We also look at sentiment, we look at accounting and governance risk, and we took the learnings from, as our colleague mentioned, Steinhoff and the likes, on how to build a robust model. So yes, we look at ESG as well as climate in our funds. So those are the two funds: our global ESG equity fund, which is Paris aligned and is fossil free. Our local ESG fund currently does not have fossil fuel. It's not designed not to hold any fossil fuel. We do not hold SASL. But yeah, we're steering away from it. However, in our indexation and passive funds, we follow the market and we steward those assets. Yeah, and this is just a bit of looking at the performance of our global ESG equity fund. So the fund was recently launched, as I mentioned, in December 2022. You can see that the fund performed quite well. So it outperformed the benchmark. There's a bit of active return there of just over 1% on an annualized basis, or actually 4%, which is quite good. And this is just, I've extracted this from a carbon report. You can see that the fund is 50% less carbon intensive than the benchmark. If you look at this sort of circle over here, and carbon intensity is you're measuring the company's carbon emissions per $1 million of sales. So it's a relative measure, and we're just highlighting that it does not hold any fossil fuel reserves. So we're really proud of the fund. It's our first actively managed Paris-aligned product. As I mentioned, we do have other passive products that's also Paris-aligned. But yeah, this is actively managed, and thank you.
Thank you so much for those presentations. Yeah, it's amazing to see the work that you're all doing and that we can invest sort of ethically and responsibly. We're going to move on to our panel discussion now. Sarah, someone just keep time for me. The panel discussion is meant to be 30 minutes. Thanks so much, Steph. Awesome. So we're going to start off sort of... Oh, there's a question. Yes, sorry about that. If you could just project.
Thank you so much. My name's Rachel. What I'm understanding from the presentations that you are all fossil fuel-ish ending. Is there anybody that can offer a product which actually does not invest in fossil fuels at all?
Well, several present. So we're trying to move away from fossil. So we're trying to promote fossil fuel-free investments. So. Awesome, thank you. Do we have any more questions before we kick off the panel discussion? And then we'll all have opportunities for questions and comments after the panel discussion as well. Thanks so much, everyone. Right, let's get going. I'm going to start with Preanka. Sorry, where's that other mic? Oh, perfect. Awesome. So, Preanka, how long has Sanlam been managing the Living Planet Fund? And how much have you managed to grow it in that time? Additionally, is that experience feeding into your other funds?
So we've been managing the fund since 2021. So over almost 3.5 years, we've been able to grow the fund by 27%. That's really coming from investment growth as well as new flows into the fund. The fund is available, and we're quite excited about this, as a member investment choice within the umbrella fund at Sanlam. But more so than that, the fund is also available to retail investors on the Sanlam platform, the 91 platform, Allen Gray, as well as Glacier, if there is any interest to invest in the fund. We're definitely seeing the theme of ESG and sustainable investing follow through into quite a few investment strategies within Sanlam, particularly within the institutional market. It is a huge imperative for our institutional clients to ensure that they're investing sustainably. And as a result, what that actually translates to is we give clients quite a bit of reporting from a qualitative basis as well as a quantitative basis on ESG and sustainability within their funds. What has been quite interesting is now when we go to pitches with clients, it's not only the clients that are currently invested in Sanlam, where they see the need for this ESG lens and sustainable investing lens, but it's also prospective clients as well. So new institutional clients where we're engaging with them, they all want to know more about ESG, what our efforts are, and only if they think we rate very well there does that actually follow through with an allocation. I think we have seen a little bit more reticence within the retail market, so financial advisors sometimes are a little bit skeptical to actually allocate, but we can talk more through those rationales a little bit later.
Awesome, thank you so much. My next question is for Traci on behalf of Dion. I'll just pass the mic along. Awesome.
Thank you.
So, Traci, we know you've had to struggle a lot to get the BCI Select ESG Equity Fund established. How has the fund performed, and how has that performance changed the view of your colleagues about ESG?
Okay, we started the fund in February 2021, and it's consistently outperformed the market. Our colleagues are getting more and more interested in ESG, and I think that we've shown that you can get returns you can still get returns and not lose your values. You can stick to your values and still get returns, which people had never thought was possible before.
Awesome, thank you so much. My next question is for Cerin. So, Cerin, how many people currently invest in the Living Planet Fund, and what are WWF's plans and targets for scaling that up?
So WWF is the main investor in the fund. We actually set the fund up almost 15 years ago. So what happened when we set the fund up was we were talking to corporates, institutional investors, asking them if they knew where their money was. But then we had to look internally and say, where is our money invested in? So we had to create a solution that's going to meet our own criteria. So that's where we set up the Living Planet Fund. And the idea of an environmental themed fund, it's not a new concept. It's actually existed in the 90s and the early 2000s. But what happened in the 90s and early 2000s is that all those funds that came to the market and said, okay, we're going to be green and sustainable, they all tanked. That's why none of them exist today. So we had to come up with a solution to this problem, and that's why we partnered with investment houses. So you can't have funds that's run by environmentalists, and you can't have sustainable funds that's run by fund managers. So you need a partnership. So WWF partnered with investment managers like Sanlam Multi-Manager to set the Living Planet Fund up. And we integrated all our criteria into the fund, and I worked on setting up all those constraints, which Preanka showed on the slides, on all the things we exclude. And we also don't just only exclude things, but we also invest in sustainable assets that's going to drive the transition. So we took a very pragmatic view of how to do this, given the fact that in the 90s and 2000s, many people lost millions of rands in savings and investments, to create something that's going to be, that's going to speak to the market, but it's also going to protect investors' capital. And WWF seeded the fund, and over time, we attracted other NGOs and trusts that also had the same values as WWF and wanted to invest in a solution that was low carbon, that looked at its water footprint, that looked at the waste that it creates, that invests in the transition. So now we have a WWF alongside many other NGOs, trusts, and as Preanka was mentioning, the fund is now on Sanlam's umbrella fund, so people all of Sanlam's clients who's part of the umbrella fund have that as a choice. Retail investors are getting involved. It's available on different lists. Financial advisors. We've done roadshows and spoken to many different advisors. So the word is getting out there, and we're starting to see more retail clients into the fund. And truth be told, we pitched this fund to many different NGOs, and a lot of them didn't put their money where their mouth is. So it's surprising, you would think that all environmental NGOs will be like, okay, let's put our pension fund into something sustainable, but it's not always the case, because people, they've said to us, look, I'm going to retire soon, and I need to think about my financial well-being. So they're not worried about their kids or the next generations. They're worried about the fact that they're going to retire soon. So it's an interesting dynamic that we see, but the fact is that more and more people are becoming attuned to not only CO2 but water, waste, and all the themes that we see that's taking place.
Wow, thank you. It's a bit disappointing to hear that about the environmental NGOs that weren't willing to put their money where their mouth is. I want to ask you to name and shame, but we won't do that tonight. Another question for Traci, this one's for you. Do you think there's an expanding market for investments that don't break the climate? And what do we need to change to build that market?
I think that the younger generation is more interested in saving the planet than the older people. And I think that when we created this fund, we thought that our market would be institutional money. but it hasn't been. It's been retail clients. So I think individuals are taking bigger responsibility of matching where their money is and making sure that it actually matches their values.
Thank you. So before we move on to some of the tougher questions for the evening, I just want to provide some context before delving into the next section of questions. The World Economic Forum notes that extreme weather events and climate-related disasters have caused significant economic losses, reaching nearly $1.5 trillion in the decade to 2019. Climate change is already costing Africa close to 5% of its GDP. A major study published in Nature this year showed that by 2050, and irrespective of any emission cuts we may still make, climate change has already baked in cuts to average incomes in Africa by 22%. Mind you, that study didn't include the effects of heat waves, sea level rise, tropical cyclones, tipping points, and damage to natural ecosystems and human health. Yet public opinion surveys and our experience shows that most South Africans still don't even understand the real cause of climate change, the fossil fuel industry. This question is for everyone, so we can just pass the mic along. Is the financial services industry in South Africa doing a good enough job of communicating these risks to your clients? Let's start with you, Waleed.
Sure. It's difficult to speak for the whole financial service industry, but certainly at our mutual investment group, we have been regularly engaging the regulators as well as institutional bodies, so ASISA, the FSCA, National Treasury, PCC, so to ensure increased awareness and ensure alignment. And we've been doing this alongside some of our biggest clients. A lot of the push is coming from our large clients in terms of the net zero and decarbonization and Paris alignment, which is fossil free, Paris aligned. So it's ongoing engagement. So it happens a couple of times a year, with these institutional bodies. And I mean, we're getting an increase in, let's call it, queries, at our sort of client service team in terms of what is our fund's exposure to thermal, to oil, to coal, to clean tech opportunities, to biodiversity, and we're screening these funds at a portfolio level as well as an overall listed equity market level. So we're definitely seeing an increase, without a doubt.
Awesome, you can just pass it along. Should I repeat the question? No, okay, cool.
We're not seeing the pension funds actually being interested in investing in ESG. They're not prepared to risk their clients' money, and they think they're going to sacrifice returns. But then, as you said, the queries are coming through, but I think it's a lot from the younger generation.
So I don't speak for the financial industry, but I do speak to them very often. I sit on the ASISA Responsible Investment Committee, engaging with PRI for a number of years. That's Principles for Responsible Investment, Principles for Sustainable Insurance, the Banking Association for South Africa, and WWF has a number of corporate partners that's within the finance sector that includes banks, asset managers, insurers. So we've been encouraging them to change for a number of years now. When I started my career, ESG didn't exist. Sustainability, I come from an investment background. I worked in financial services before joining WWF, and engaging with hardcore capitalists, the environmental issues, social issues, you're seen as a tree hugger. There was a negative perception. But that's really been changing over the last 10 years, slowly but surely. There was no ESG specialist, sustainability specialist when I started working. Now when you go to a financial institution or financial house, they've got an ESG specialist. Some financial institutions have a whole sustainability team. And we've moved beyond from those sustainability teams just doing the sustainability reports that's required by the JSE reporting standards, to individuals who's actually creating products, sustainability products, and that's the people you have in front of you here today. And there's many more within the finance sector that's looking to issue green bonds, sustainability linked loans. So there's a host of new sustainability themed products that's coming out, and that's still very much smaller compared to the legacy assets within the financial industry at large. But I think the financial industry will start talking to their clients about sustainability when they have products to pitch, because then it's within their financial interest. Remember, these are private companies. They're profit driven at the end of the day. If it doesn't make sense for them financially, they're not going to do it. They're not a WWF. They are beholden to their shareholders and their board of directors and to the bottom line. And we're starting to see now that financial themed products in the ESG space is starting to make money for them, and so more and more of them are coming to the market, and therefore more and more engagement between the financial institutions and their clients is happening. And there's only so much the discussion can go, because these are bankers, they have BComs, they have MBAs, and none of that teaches you anything about CO2 emissions, about water, about biodiversity. So that's why having WWF to certain financial institutions as a partner is really important, because we can help them engage with their clients in a more meaningful way. And we have seen the request for information, the request for time, presentations, workshops, just increase exponentially within the financial sector, because the guard is changing, and the people that are taking over, they believe in this, and they're transforming the businesses within the businesses slowly but surely, because there's a lot of legacy here. But there is an increase in the engagement between the financial institutions and their clients on sustainability, and I think that hopefully answers your question.
Definitely. Thank you so much. We'll let Preanka and David just weigh in on that.
Thanks. I mean, I take a slightly different view. I think within the institutional landscape, you find that clients are well versed when it comes to ESG and sustainable investing. I am a little bit, I struggle with the retail environment. I think a lot of the concepts that we talk about, we love to use terms like SDGs and ESG. I don't think that's well understood within the retail market. I think that a lot of the times we don't spend enough time communicating or engaging to ensure that it's fit for purpose. So I struggle a little bit more with the retail environment. I think there's a lot of room for improvement for corporates to engage with financial advisors as well as end clients when it comes to upskilling them. And I just wanted to make one comment when it came to talking about the requests for ESG funds within the institutional setting. What is very interesting is that when you look at a lot of institutional clients, they might not necessarily want an ESG fund. However, what they are trying to do with their existing asset managers is asking them to conform to ESG standards. So provide evidence of whether they're using ESG as a risk mitigation tool or return enhancing tool within their portfolios. So I think ESG is not going to be as nuclear, where there's just going to be search for ESG type funds. I think, broadly from a market perspective, what we are seeing is the fact that every fund in South Africa there's going to be an impetus for them to include sustainable investing and be able to evidence it, most importantly, within their approach.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Preanka. I mean, I feel like I hardly need to say anything at this point, because firstly, your impression that the financial services companies are not speaking enough to retail clients is very much our impression. And we would love to see far more active communication from all asset managers on these issues with their retail base. Essentially, in a sense, saying these are the problems we see coming, these are the risks that you face, these are the risks that we can't avoid to your savings, and we really need you as the public to kind of give us the license to be more aggressive in addressing these risks. And I also completely agree that we would be delighted to see ESG practices and the ESG insights integrated across the board and not just kept condensed into certain specific funds. These are practices that should be universal.
Maybe if you don't mind.
Yes, go ahead.
So I couldn't agree more. So are we viewing ESG? I don't want to say the term ESG is to be redundant in the next 5 to 10 years, but we see it as any other factor, any other risk, idiosyncratic company-specific risks. So if I look at ESG, I don't think of it as something separate. I try to integrate it with all other factors. And I see it as a core risk mitigator in our portfolio construction process.
You can hold on to the mic. I have a question for you. And then to Preanka after. How is Old Mutual communicating these risks to your clients? And then for Preanka, how is Sanlam communicating these risks to your clients?
I think we have retail clients.
We engage our clients on these risks. Institutional clients, we do have regular DDs where we take them through the risk at a portfolio level. We also, if we onboard new clients, for example, our net zero commitment. So Old Mutual Investment Group, our biggest client is the life company, Old Mutual Life Insurance Company, and they've also made a net zero commitment. And a lot of our funds, they're all 50% plus. So they sort of, it's not, do you believe in this climate, or when are you going to introduce a climate strategy? It's implemented. This is the D date. And it's being driven by one of our largest clients. So I guess our job is a bit easy in that sense. We continuously addressing these risks with our clients when we have roadshows. So recently we had a Tomorrow event. I'm not sure if everyone was aware of that. Old Mutual launched our Tomorrow magazine, an event where we actually engaging our clients on these topical issues of climate, of net zero, and our approach. I brought a few copies of the magazine at the front, and it's also, the link to it is on the thank you page on the presentation. So if you want to have a look there to find out more about it.
Awesome, thank you. Just pass over to you.
Thank you. So we're probably taking a slightly different approach when it comes to the retail market and engaging with them on ESG risks. So just some interesting statistics. NMG does a study on an annual basis where they engage independent financial advisors within the South African environment and pose a series of questions to them. So last year, NMG asked independent financial advisors, what are your views on ESG? The results were quite frightening, to say the least. Almost a third of respondents said that they believe ESG erodes investment returns. 52% of respondents, so these are independent financial advisors in South Africa, 52% said that they believe ESG has no impact on investment returns. So that leaves a mere 15% who believe that ESG adds value and improves investment returns. So that's quite frightening. All that means for us as Sanlam Investments multi-manager is that the way we engage financial advisors has to be a little bit different. We can't use the same toolkit that we use with the institutional market, which means addressing climate change challenges within quarterly investment committee meetings or via articles or podcasts or industry discussions. We have to be a little bit more deliberate and take a slightly different approach. What we've started to do at Sanlam Investments Multi-Manager is talk to clients a little bit more about the transition that you're seeing in the different generations, so wealth transfer, future-proofing practices, their practices in particular, and there's a really nice link when you think about wealth transfer and future-proofing advisor practices when it comes to ESG. So just talking about wealth transfer really quickly, Knight Frank, which is a global property consulting firm, has a really staggering statistic. So they're of the view that $90 trillion are going to change hands from the baby boomers to millennials. That's a crazy amount of money. Now, why is that important? Well, when you start to profile millennials, and Traci mentioned it a little bit earlier, it's very interesting. Millennials live in a very social environment, and as a result, social responsible investing is key. So we speak to financial advisors. I'm going to answer your question now, but when we speak to financial advisors, we say to them, you know, we understand that ESG might not resonate with you for whatever reason. However, if you're thinking about future-proofing your business and your prospective clients coming in, this surely resonates with them. And so we think that's really where there's this impetus for them to start to think more clearly and more deliberately about ESG and why it's very important for the retail market.
Thank you. We're noting the questions. Could we just keep them until the Q&A section? I know we are over time. Thank you so much. I have like 4 timekeepers in the audience. Thank you so much. So I think I'll just move to the final 2 questions, just in the interest of time. This question is once again for everyone. If your institution supports the invest and engage approach, where's the real evidence that that approach is working? I can start with you.
Okay. So we do support the invest and engage approach. At Sanlam Investments Multi-Manager, we take the proxy, so we invest in asset managers and their asset management strategies. It is the responsibility of the underlying asset manager to submit their proxy voting to us on an annual basis. Our team spends time analyzing how companies have voted on specific proxies. We set up specific engagements with asset managers to understand and question the rationales for whether they were pro-proxy, where they voted against a proxy, and where they chose to abstain. We also have a look at the holdings of asset managers, and we put it through our proprietary system, and it spits out some quantitative data, and we're able to see from a trend perspective whether asset managers are actually improving. And here again, it leads to some discussion points for us. Now you're probably wondering, well, you know, you're talking a lot to asset managers, how are you holding them accountable? Well, we rate asset managers. And it's really important that we rate asset managers because that helps them stay accountable, and it helps us ensure that we're only investing in the creme de la creme of asset manager strategies who are making a deliberate and concerted effort in terms of sustainable investing. I just wanted to mention one last thing.
Go ahead.
We also have a huge private markets program at Sanlam. What you tend to find within the alternative space is those structuring of those funds do lend themselves quite nicely to SDGs, so those sustainable development goals. And typically what you find within those funds is that they do target clean water, no poverty, no hunger. And so at Sanlam Investments, we target 14 of the 17 SDGs within our alternatives program.
Wow, impressive. Thank you. Waleed?
Yeah, thank you. So from an offshore perspective, if you think about global assets, we prefer divesting and we have exclusions. That's on, if you think of the MSCI All Country World Index, there's 3,000 companies in the investable universe. If you divest from 200 companies from a market cap perspective, you still got 95% of the universe. So you can divest. However, from a South African context, given South Africa is a coal-dependent emerging market, and 30% of our market is the resource sector, it becomes difficult, especially given the nature of our mutual. We have active funds, we have passive funds, smart beta funds, etc., quant funds. So you have to invest in the entire market, given certain strategies that we hold. So we do believe in stewarding those assets. So as you mentioned, holding and engaging those companies. We do have a robust stewardship program and a stewardship team in our mutual investment group where we engage these companies frequently. We have engagement database, we vote all our proxies. I mean, just yesterday, I mean, Rob, who leads our stewardship program, had an engagement with Exara in terms of the sort of business model change. You know, what they're doing in terms of the old mines or the dump sites that they're turning into agricultural land to uplift the communities. And so we do have a rigorous stewardship program where we actively engaging these companies, checking in with them on their targets and their progress. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sorry to interrupt, but both of you, I don't feel like you've really sort of given us a sense of where and how fossil fuel companies are changing their practices as a result of your engagement. And that's really what we were hoping to get to with this question.
You can elaborate a little bit more if you'd like to.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think of the main eaters, you know, like your Sasol, Glencore, you know, of course, Exara has transition plans. So, yeah, we do engage those companies, and they, of course, bring forward their sort of transition plans, not just in terms of the, you know, eliminating fossil fuel and their business model change, but also their just transition. What are they going to do with the communities and deployment and so on and so forth. So, yeah, and we do have certain case studies that I'm sure we can share with the audience. I'm happy to, I don't know through which forum, but I'm happy to chat to our stewardship team and we can perhaps share it. Maybe I can share it with you, David. I don't know if you've been engaging with Rob Lewinson, who leads our stewardship program. Yeah, some examples, tangible examples of the progress we made and some of the,
yeah, that would be great, and then we can share it with the audience here tonight as well.
Happy to do that.
Perfect.
There might be a few examples in the responsible investment report as well, on the link, which, yeah.
We're super pressed for time, so maybe Traci, you can, and Cerin can just quickly answer, and then we can hand back to Preanka before we close the panel discussion.
We're a small company. We're busy changing our company from the inside. So we have a ESG program inside the company, educating financial advisors about ESG, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's no easy answer to this question because we vote our proxies, we make sure the proxies are ESG aligned, and when there are agenda items on AGMs, sustainability themed, we vote in line with that. But look, when it comes to companies changing their practices, there has to be a financial incentive to do that, and you know, the share prices don't move enough if you know, we vote certain things in the AGM. If you think about the heavy emitters, the externalities, they don't pay for them, right? The pollution. And that's actually what you need to get to the point of, because then that's going to be a financial incentive to actually change. So we engage with companies across industries, across the financial sector, and as long as there's an investment case, people are going to put money into those companies. We spend a lot of time talking about Sasol, and very, very recently, they were allowed to breach the air quality standards. Yeah? And you know, we engaged with them and we specifically told them, you can't measure air quality standards the way you want to do that, and you're going to be in breach of the regulations. But then what happened is the regulator said, no, it's fine, you can just continue. And I'm just being facetious how they'd say that, but that's essentially what happened, right? They were allowed to continue polluting, no financial consequence. So it makes it very difficult for, you know, proxies to have an impact, you know, when we vote at AGMs, when externalities are not, the polluter does not pay, right? WWF has been instrumental in getting the Climate Change Act signed, the carbon tax, and the carbon tax, and the carbon tax, the way it's been implemented, it's given the big polluters massive leeway, and that makes the investment case for the fossil fuel industry still viable. So, as much as we want to see the true cost of all these things being factored into the investment case, which is what we do in our investment thesis, you look at the true cost of what all those externalities are: CO2, water, waste, natural resource usage, pollution, all those things. But until the polluter pays, we're not going to see the share price of those companies come down. And that's actually going to benefit us because we factor that into our investment decisions for the long term. So, it's very hard for financial institutions and asset managers, portfolio managers to drive the change. We ask them about policies on carbon, we ask them about policies on water, we ask about sustainability policies, how is ESG or sustainability linked to remuneration, all those things, and we push companies for targets. But it's hard to show a measurable change until we get that polluter pays, that kind of thing. When that gains traction, then you're going to see the ESG funds just fly, because fossil fuel funds are great, but look, South 32 share price just went up just the other day, right, on the back of some Chinese stimulus. So that's just one example of how the investment case for coal, for oil, and for gas, natural resources is still very much there. And until those companies start to pay for the externalities, do a carbon tax, do fines for clearly going over the air quality standards, it's going to be very difficult to answer your question the way you want us to say. Financial institutions can force companies to change the way they run their businesses, and that's had a meaningful impact on environment, biodiversity, and water system. I'm sure that answers your question. So, very quickly.
Just very quickly, we can't make a huge change to how corporates work. But what we are trying to do is make sure that our fund sticks to our values. So we're making sure that it's good for the environment, it's good for social, it's good for governance. And that's the change that we can make. We give them a place for investors to go and put their money where they know they match their values.
Thank you. I'm going to close off the panel discussion for now and then open the floor for a Q&A session. I know, Preanka, you want to say one or two other things, but if you can just add that to the Q&A component, thank you so much. I did want to say something from fossil-free South Africa's perspective, and that is that our view is that asset managers could do a lot more on climate change, lobbying government for stronger climate action, being far more active in educating clients about the risks of climate change to their investments, and stopping all investments in fossil fuel companies, because at the end of the day, we are a fossil fuel divestment campaign. I'm now going to open up the floor for a Q&A session, but before that, we did want Joe to come up and just for a quick second walk us through the investment guide.
Thank you, everybody. Hello, I'm Joanne Smith, and I'm standing here because I wrote a lot of the latest update of the guide. So I'll just tell you, I think, how it can benefit you, how you can use it. First, just to say this is very much a team effort that David has written over the past 3 years. And we've been able to add a huge amount more nitty-gritty and a lot more funds, thanks largely to Brad McWall, who's sitting over there, who took the initiative to suggest a whole lot more funds to us with the terms ESG and sustainable environment in there for us to research. So Brad's help was the one game changer, and the second was artificial intelligence. Because we worked out that when we asked Perplexity, a particularly useful AI tool for fact checking, whether a fund was fossil free, it would generally say yes in a very sort of gay and happy way, and it was wrong. But what it did do is provide a whole source documents that will take a weeks to fund. So in fund fact sheets, you won't find whether a fund is fossil fuel free or any other bad things that it excludes. You'll have to dig and dig and dig on the internet, but artificial intelligence did that for us. So that information was buried in sustainability reports and annual reports and investment approach documents and things that just 2 years ago would have been extremely hard to find. We drew up this handbook just to kind of lure people into the guide in a friendly, sort of colourful way. This handbook talks about why fossil fuel free investing is important. The 4 steps you can take towards creating an ethical portfolio, because it's kind of, almost it's a gargantuan task. And one of the steps that we emphasize in the guide is to please use the services of a financial advisor and not just launch straight in, because we cannot really recommend funds to suit your purposes or to give you the returns you need, so you will need help. The guide itself, there's a QR code here which links to the guide, and the guide is online. It's a bit of an EFT document that you can search for the sections that you'll find useful. There's an introduction, providing some context, and then there's several different categories of funds. The first is South African funds, and there are only 3 South African funds that we've found that we recommend, and those are the ones that we have the representatives of here. By Efficient and Old Mutual and Sanlam. Those are the only 3 funds that we actually feel comfortable with that are locally created. Then there are funds investing in emerging markets. There's only 2. Then there's global funds, and these are funds that invest either entirely or largely outside of South Africa, that are available to South Africans in rands. And then there are offshore funds, which also invest largely or entirely outside of South Africa, and are available only in other currencies, but we can access them. So because of artificial intelligence's document producing powers, we were able to drill down into a lot of nitty-gritty about what each of these funds excludes and what each fund chooses to invest in. So that is a very interesting exercise. If you decide to do your own research and find any different information, please let us know. This is very much a work in progress, this guide, and we're very aware that in 6 months' time, so the life has changed quite a lot. Then along with those lists and descriptions of funds, there are a whole lot of other appendices which we hope will answer questions you may have, such as there's one section that gives evidence on how ESG performs better than conventional funds over time. So I just want to maybe just you were mentioning the need to invest, the need to invest in fossil fuels or that at least the investment firms see the need to invest in fossil fuels in order to get good returns, because those companies are getting good returns. But that's from what we found, that's in the short term. If you look 5 years or longer, sustainable funds, truly sustainable funds, outperform traditional funds. We're not saying that that's what the evidence that we found says. So please look at that in the guide and go to those links if you've got any other feedback for us there as well. Those appendices also include a broader description of ESG and some online platforms where you can type in fund names and you can type in company names and you can see evaluations of their ESG criteria. So given that this is very much an ongoing process, this guide, and that it's been created with the help of quite a lot of people, and we'd love your feedback. We'd love to hear whether it's useful to you and whether there's anything else you need from it, and whether you'd like us to add the share. Thank you.
The guide is linked to the email that we sent out inviting you all to tonight's event. But yeah, please let us know if you'd like us to send that again. We'll now move on to the Q&A session. We're welcome to ask our panelists questions or just provide any comments. We only have 10 minutes allocated to this session, so if you can keep your questions kind of brief as well as your answers, I'm very sorry. I guess we'll start with Brad. This is no bias.
Thank you. Hi everyone.
So, as there was that 15% number, this made me very bleak. But independent financial planners, we need help because you can have a look at we need a sea of movement. You can look at it, an entity is a company, a big corporation is a lifeless entity, and it's run by well-meaning people. It's a lifeless entity, and so we need people to come out and help individuals. And it's almost like you can imagine. I like my water analogies. You can imagine like everything is just water, and it's kind of meaningless. But when you have something with meaning coming in, it's like a little bit of a coloring drop. You put it in it, and it makes the whole glass of water red. And so the idea is that as an independent financial planner, the SPI, the Financial Planning Institute, is something that every certified financial planner, not even whether you're independent or tied, is part of. And there's nothing they are doing in any meaningful way to educate financial planners in ESG and sustainable investment, how important it is. I try to invite my team of colleagues from other companies with me, and I'm the only one that's here. So how can you guys help us through forums like the SPI and that type of thing? So I think that can be extremely valuable. I've got so many ideas in my head, and I think we need help here because it's still even. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's more of a statement. And I'm happy to engage in it further. Perfect.
I just have one comment about the handbook, not the guide, that it's not accessible on the internet through I couldn't access it. It seems to be on Canva and it doesn't download. So I just want to point that out. It would be useful if it was a PDF we could download easily. Then I also had a question. I think it's Cerin. You said that you were talking about pollution pays. Do you see, I didn't quite get, do you see there's a point at which there's some legislation coming in when polluters will be forced to pay? Or is this just wishful thinking?
Yeah, there is that point. So there's a carbon tax, and it puts a price on the carbon. And since it was assigned into my tax law, I think there was a time period to give heavy polluters a grace period. So they don't actually have to pay the full amount of tax. I think they're still allowed to emit certain amounts. So I'm not exactly sure when they'll start paying the full amount. And the South African tax on carbon is extremely low than what the actual cost of carbon should be in dollar terms. So even when the polluter does start to pay, it's still going to be still low. But when we talk about risk in the in stock picking for companies, that means there's going to be financial risk for the company. So you're discounting all the future earnings into perpetuity. And now suddenly you start to say, well, actually the earnings are going to be a lot less because they have to pay a lot more tax because they're losing. And then you discount that back and the value of the company is a lot lower. So the investment case starts to shift. So you'll see, you won't have to motivate people to divest then, because now suddenly the company that had X% of earnings is quite much less earnings because they're actually paying for the resources that they would. Or they do the right thing and invest in abatement, maybe carbon capture storage or something like that. So yeah, we'll listen to that.
I have just a comment and then just more questions. The one comment is to do with what Brad is saying. I think we have to acknowledge that there's an entire generation of managers, asset managers, investment managers, whatever, I don't know the lingo, that have been trained to believe that this is the only way to do it, and so they believe they are doing their job.
And so they don't believe ESG is a route to direct, and that's why there's only that 15% that believe it. So second, the point that we need to start seeing criticism of people who believe that they're just doing their job because they were trained to do it, but rather seeing more effort from bigger corporations to retrain or upskill from the learning kind of space from university or coming into these organizations or these groupings to kind of retrain and upskill them. Then small question and then another small question. Is another question, more of a point. Traci said all fossil free and you fossil fuel free, but just plucking your teeth quickly and noting that Anglo-Americans noted under steel making coals. I think we just need to make sure that we, as just that when we speak about it, acknowledging the point that it is, very difficult at the moment, and then just putting out the question, how do we steer the conversation that we've just had this evening to better suit the majority black working class that form society in South Africa and everyday workspaces and NGOs, especially when the direction comes from neoliberal organizations and companies that have not often spoken to the black working class in ways that have felt welcoming. We know that this is the mass that you want, so how do we talk to the mass that you want at the end of the day? And so that when the question that David asked, so what are you actually doing? Well, actually, we don't really know how to change things, but then you turn to NGOs and the black working class and ask them, what are you doing? So my question is more, how do we steer this conversation so that you can get to hold that dialogue? Thank you.
Okay, and very good. We've also got to take into account that SMG is very important. We have a lot of people employed at mines and we can't. We also have to do things responsibly. And then, so that's why that's in there. And then engage real hope in the black community. I think that what we have to do is that it's actually about companies actually allowing us in to talk to them as well. There doesn't seem to be enough companies that say come in and speak to more my people that are kind of full. They don't seem to do that. And for me to get into that space as an independent financial advisor, the best way for me to get in is through a medical insurance product. It's not through an investment case. And given the role they may contribute to pension, and they're not included in those conversations about where the money is invested. So that's my opinion.
We do want to get confidence. It's not ourselves, but our retail team, where you speak to the area person on the suit in terms of educating them how to invest in these products, while else stating the products. There are sort of asset class TV podcasts and things that we produce on a monthly basis. There that answers the question on how South Africa was social.
Yeah, so I think Traci mentioned an important point. I think at Sanlam we're very mindful of the fact that you have to balance the environment or the social considerations. I think it's also just important to be mindful that different people are at different points of this transition journey. And so you have some clients who are very, very willing, to go all in, and there's some clients that are just at the starting point. So when it comes to the creation of products, we have to ensure that they fit for purpose for everyone. In terms of the black working class that you addressed and how we are engaging with them, we also host a number of sessions. We've presented at forums like Meet the Managers and Investment Forum, where we socialise topics of ESG to try and get the information out there. We do also do quite a lot of articles which we publish. And we make accessible. We know millennials these days are far more likely to read an article via WhatsApp than they are, to download it or open up a newspaper. So we've been very deliberate about the ways in which we communicate and distribute information at Sanlam. But I think something that's also just important to be mindful of is we've done a bit of research within the multi-manager. The amount of South Africans that we impact is 10 million South Africans. That's almost, if you look at the last census numbers, that's almost 1 in 6 South Africans. And we're mindful of the fact that sometimes we hold on and know a lot more information regarding sustainable investing and ESG
I can assure you that as part of our process, as I mentioned earlier, we have a quantitative and a qualitative process that we include when it comes to screening and investments, and taking into account the E, the S, and the G. We place a lot of emphasis on managers to try and hold them accountable. And so for those South Africans that we can't physically reach or formally reach, we want them to know that they're still being taken care of in terms of sustainable investing.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe like 2 or 3 more questions. So let's go to this side of the audience. Okay, we'll start there.
I think firstly, congratulations to cost-free. You're actually getting the first ESG fund out with Traci and everybody else. And congratulations to the other guys that got ESG funds open. Just a couple of observations. I think you touched on the externalities thing. And Traci, I've sent you something where the externalities is much higher than the cost is much higher than you've got. But the reality is that if we're not costing externalities in, we're actually not doing true investment. And that's a critical aspect of the thing. We need to go on that conversation far more. I've also taken beyond fossils to the total biodiversity issue and the 9 planetary boundaries, of which we've surpassed 7 already, which is terrifying, if you think about it. Rockström's got a later presentation that he talks about how we can come back in that, which is really interesting push. For me, the conversation about wealth transfer is absolutely critical, because what's happening right now is the wealth transfer is being destroyed. In southern USA, Cyclone Helene has just destroyed wealth transfer completely centered. The insurance companies are underwriting housing in that space. South Africa is doing the same thing at the moment. So the conversation around wealth transfer is actually pure. Polluter pays principle. I think what we've got to change that term to polluter production pays, not polluter pays principle, because Coca-Cola and other companies pass the blame onto the user, and they blame the user as the producer, not the production or pollution. So we have to shift that conversation as well. And then I think lastly, what is really critical in all of this is that we look at this wealth transfer education. And we've had a conversation around educating the financial advisors. I believe that financial advisors have to do an annual course, at least 1 or 2 annual courses. Just make one of the courses every year a compulsory course in terms of understanding ESG and the environmental implications. And I put that challenge to WWF to drive that conversation with the CISA, because that's a massively critical thing. We're trying to do it in other spaces, and it's starting to work. But if we do that, then every advisor has to, within 1 or 2 years, actually understand what it's about. And that'll change it massively.
Thank you.
Just I think a simple question, but in the spirit of access to these products, can you talk to us a little about the cost of them and the logic of the creation of the product? Is it still a product to make profit for those who still product? Or is it a product that is holistic, not just in the ESG sense of the word, but about creating access at an affordable rate so that we can all actually be involved, and not just those of us who may be occupied the cost.
Yes. So on the affordability standpoint, on the Living Planet Fund for institutional investors and 75 basis points at 0.75% per annum, it's slightly higher on the retail side. I'll get you the exact fee. The reason why it's more expensive to retail advisors is companies in South Africa, managers in South Africa, price things based on asset size, how much assets you're bringing into the party. There's lots of administration that happens when it comes to pricing funds and doing calculations. That's why it's slightly more expensive to retail clients. But they are the WWF fund, when we look at it compared to, I showed you a little bit earlier, the Alexander Forbes Large Manager Watch that you're outperforming, the largest balanced fund managers in South Africa. The costing is very competitive relative to those large balance managers who, are not going to be or not going to have as many risk restrictions in terms of what you can and cannot invest in. There are also more low-cost options that we do offer at Sanlam. So
He spoke to trackers. We have, in particular, the Statrix MSCI, MSCI tracker. That's an ESG fund that targets 30% less carbon emissions than the actual index. So if you're looking for something that's a lot more cost effective, you don't necessarily have to go active. You can also look at passive as well. So there are different opportunities that are out there. I think, across the board, we are so mindful that cost is everything because it erodes into your investment return. But I think, across the board, financial services companies are trying to look at various avenues to ensure the democratization of investments.
Good.
I think that's a very good point, just in terms of the costing. So in terms of accessing non-mutual investment groups and ESG product suite, the second link, I know I've got a bunch of links in, but I'm not sure, maybe we can share the presentation. I'm happy to share it. And the final page, you can just go on the second link.
Into the investing page, do you want to invest in our ESG products? But as you mentioned, there are cheap options. So we have our actively managed global and local ESG product with a fees over, I think it's about 1.5%. So that's actually depending on the amount you invest in. But you do have the passive tracker options, which we still grew quite significantly over the past couple of years. So we were first to market with the index funds, if you can say the word, in US funds. And those funds, if you look at our passive book, we weren't 50% of our offering because of our passive book. So a lot of the institutional clients are moving towards our ESG funds because firstly, you're better for the environment and you're not sacrificing returns. And it's 100%, I think it's like 75 or 70 books, 0.7% on a fee perspective. So there are various options giving from an active perspective, like as the investor.
The slightly scaled ESG equity fund, you can access to what you can use in the unit trusts. You can use an RA for the work-based living. Johan said something that was very important. I think as with all investments, you should actually speak to a financial advisor because especially our equity fund is building block and it is lenders. And again, with investments, there's no one size fits all. And it's about finding how much can you afford to invest and finding the best route. Is unit trust the best option for you? Is RA important? Yes, that. So if anyone wants to ask questions, it's the office.
So, on the personal side, I'm a retail investor in the Sanlam Living Planet Fund via Glacier, and I get my statement at one. It gives you the TR and the TIC there. The cost is about 1.01%, 4.03, somewhere around there, which is very, very competitive for a multi-asset balanced fund. So, give you an indication of what the retail investor would pay. And as Preanka said, institutional clients pay us 0.75%.
We'll take one more question.
Yeah, it's just a thought, I guess, more than a question. And a lot of the responses that I'm hearing, it often sounds like we're saying sustainability or cheaper options. And for me, that is an issue of equity. And that the percentage with which someone is able to invest, whether that's R1 or 9 million rand, it's a percentage of what they have in total, what they can invest, and everyone should have access to sustainable funds. And I think it speaks to this issue of what are we comparing against? Because we're talking about this fund is compared to this fund much more sustainable, but are our benchmarks even aligned with those planetary boundaries? Are the benchmarks that we're using progressive enough in the first place? So it's more just what I'm leaving with in terms of, I think, a gap that still needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for those that posed questions, thoughts, critiques. I think if you still have questions or comments for either the free team or on the enemies tonight, you can just stick around also if you guys are comfortable with and share maybe your emails or some other way to MQ. So it's tonight.
I think I'll just close the night with some special thanks. We at Fossil Free would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who contributed to making the guide as best tonight possible. So our amazing panelists, Joanne, thank you. Joanne and David, who co-authored and co-edited the guide. Brad, Gotham, whose insights have been invaluable in this endeavor. And then just the fossil-free events, comms, and divestment teams. Panelists, as well as Brad, we have gifts for you. After we close off, you can just stay behind so that myself or Emma can hand the gifts to you. For the gifts, we've purchased carbon fairs for the Kuyasa project. No, let's tell you the point of that.
Understood.
Thank you for your patience. Kuyasa is a low-carbon housing development in one of the poorest and most vulnerable corners of Khayelitsha, Western Cape. By 2014, the project had installed solar water heaters, 110 liter units, ceilings, and compact fluorescent energy-efficient light bulbs on 2,100 houses. The project saves households money that would have been spent on coal-fired electricity and supplementary paraffin, improves indoor air quality, and reduces greenhouse gas emissions. The revenue from the sale of the project's carbon credits have mainly been used for the ongoing maintenance of the solar water heaters, so you will all be receiving a carbon credit certificate. So thank you so much again. We would also like to thank everyone who has supported Fossil Free South Africa in our efforts to put together the guide and who has supported our campaigns, and to everyone who took time out of their busy lives to be here with us tonight. We really hope you're able to take something away from tonight, and we really hope to see you at our next event. It was Desmond Tutu who specifically endorsed our campaign for UCT to divest, who in 2014 said, "People of conscience need to break their ties with corporations financing the injustice of climate change." We are committed to help you all to that, and we hope tonight's another firm step along that path. Thank you so much and good night.